The Japanese billionaire's card got declined, but what the black maid's daughter did next shocked everyone. His world was built on precision and profit, but in that moment, all he saw was red. Kenjio Soto, a man whose name moved markets from Tokyo to New York, stood frozen as the machine declared him unworthy. A little girl with bright, curious eyes watched him, her hand clutching a worn leather wallet. The sterile fluorescent lights of the convenience store hummed, a monotonous sound in the sudden, sharp silence. Kenjio stared at the credit card reader. The word declined glowed with an impudent red, a color he usually only saw on the balance sheets of his failing competitors. A man behind him, his worn work boot smudged with dirt, shifted his weight. "Problem?" he asked, his voice rough around the edges. Kenjio didn't turn. He was used to people speaking to him with a certain reverence, a hushed respect. This man's tone was flat, impatient. It was ordinary, and that was the problem. Kenjio was not an ordinary man. He slid another card from his wallet. This one, a sleek black rectangle of titanium reserved for purchases that could fund a small nation. He tapped it on the reader with a flick of his wrist. Declined. The cashier, a young woman with a name tag that read Brenda, chewed on her lower lip. "Sir, I can try it again." "Don't bother," Kenjio said, his voice a low growl. The accent, a crisp, formal Japanese, was usually enough to command attention. Here, it just seemed to make him more of a spectacle. A teenager further back in the line snickered. "Dude's dressed like a king but can't buy a bottle of water," his friend chimed in. Maybe his limo ran out of gas and he spent all his cash. The laughter, though muffled, felt like a physical blow. Kenjio's shoulders, usually ramrod straight, tensed. He was dressed in a bespoke suit, the fabric a whisper of silk and wool that cost more than the entire inventory of this sad little store. On his wrist, a watch ticked with the quiet precision of a master craftsman. He was the epitome of wealth, of power, of a life lived beyond the reach of ordinary men, and he couldn't buy a simple bottle of water. "I can pay for it." The voice was small, high-pitched, and impossibly clear in the charged atmosphere. Kenjio turned, his eyes slowly adjusting to the source of the sound. A little girl, no older than 10, stood beside him. She was a black child with braids adorned with colorful beads, and her eyes were fixed on him with a startling intensity. She was small, with scuffed knees and a faded t-shirt that had probably seen better days. In her outstretched hand, she held a worn brown leather wallet. It was the kind of wallet a man might carry, creased with age and softened by years of use. Kenjio stared at her, then at the wallet, a flicker of something unfamiliar, confusion perhaps, in his dark eyes. "I don't need your money, child." "But your cards don't work," she said, her logic simple and unassailable. "And you look thirsty." She pushed the wallet closer to him. "My mom says you should always help someone who needs it. It's what heroes do." A woman at the back of the line sighed dramatically. "Oh, for heaven's sake. Now the kid's trying to bail out the rich guy. This is better than television." Brenda the cashier looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "Sir, do you want the water or not?" Kenjio felt a muscle in his jaw tighten. He should leave. He should walk out, get back into his waiting town car, and forget this humiliation. But he couldn't. The girl's unwavering gaze held him captive. There was no pity in her eyes, no judgment. Just a simple, unadorned offer of help. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. "Maya," she said. "But my mom calls me Sunshine." "Well, Maya," he said, crouching down to her level, the expensive fabric of his suit creasing. "That is a very kind offer, but I assure you, I can afford the water." "Then why is the machine saying no?" she asked, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. Before Kenjio could answer, a woman's voice cut through the air. "Maya, there you are. I told you to wait for me by the magazines." A black woman in a simple, clean maid's uniform hurried towards them. Her face was etched with worry, her hands twisting a corner of her apron. She looked at Kenjio, her eyes widening at his expensive suit and the air of authority that clung to him. Then she looked at her daughter and at the wallet in her hand. "I am so sorry, sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly. She's not bothering you, is she? Not at all, Kenjio said, his gaze still on Maya. Your daughter was just offering me a loan. The woman, Imoni, blushed. Maya, put that away. That's your great-grandpa's wallet. You know you're not supposed to take it out. Maya clutched the wallet to her chest. But he was a hero, Mom. And he would have helped. Imoni looked from Kenjio to her daughter, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and pride. I'm sorry, sir. My grandfather, he was a soldier. He taught us to always look out for people. Kenjio stood up, his height seeming to fill the small space. He looked at the mother, at her worn-out shoes and her tired eyes, and then at the daughter with her fierce loyalty and her simple, unwavering belief in doing the right thing. He had been surrounded by people his entire life, assistants and advisors and bodyguards, but in that moment, he felt a loneliness so profound it almost stole his breath. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a money clip, peeling off a crisp $100 bill. He handed it to Brenda. For the water, he said, his voice firm. And for everyone else in the line. Whatever they're buying, it's on me. A murmur of surprise rippled through the line. The teenager who had mocked him now stared at him with wide eyes. Brenda took the money, her hand shaking slightly. Kenjio then turned to Maya. He knelt down once more. Your great-grandfather was a wise man, he said. And you, little one, are a worthy heir to his legacy. He then stood, gave a slight nod to Imoni, and walked out of the store. The town car, a long black shadow against the setting sun, was waiting for him at the curb. As he slid into the plush leather seats, he could still feel the weight of the little girl's gaze, a gaze that had seen not a billionaire titan, but just a man who was thirsty. And in that simple act of seeing, she had shown him a world he had long forgotten existed. A world where kindness was a currency more valuable than gold. He had come to this small, forgotten town to finalize an acquisition that would add another jewel to his already heavy crown. But as the car pulled away, leaving the convenience store and the little girl behind, Kenjio had a feeling that the most significant transaction of his life had just taken place, and it had cost him nothing at all. The car moved with a silent, electric grace. His phone buzzed. It was his chief of staff, Arthur, a man whose entire existence was dedicated to ensuring Kenjio's world ran without friction. Sir, Arthur's voice was crisp, efficient. The issue with your cards has been resolved. A security flag was triggered by the unusual location. It won't happen again. Fine, Kenjio said, his voice flat. He stared out the window at the passing landscape of small houses and dusty fields, a world away from the gleaming steel and glass towers of Tokyo. Also, a reminder that the final meeting with the Miller family is scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Their legal team sent over the final papers. They've accepted our terms. They had no choice, Kenjio murmured. The Miller farm was a sprawling piece of land, the last holdout against his company's plan to build a massive tech campus. He had offered them a price that was, by all accounts, generous. But it wasn't about generosity. It was about acquisition. Indeed, sir, Arthur said. Old man Miller is sentimental, but his sons are practical. They understand the value of progress. Progress. Kenjio rolled the word around in his mind. He had always seen himself as an agent of progress. But looking out at the fading light, he wondered what progress looked like to the people who lived in these quiet towns. Did it look like a tech campus? Or did it look like a little girl offering her great-grandfather's wallet to a stranger? He ended the call and leaned his head back. He was staying in a sprawling modern mansion on the outskirts of town, a sterile glass box rented for him. But for the first time in a long time, he found himself craving something else. He thought of Maya, of her clear, unafraid eyes, and of her mother, Imoni, with her tired face and quiet dignity. On a whim, he leaned forward. David, turn the car around. Take me back to that convenience store. A few minutes later, they were back. The line was gone. Kenjio walked into the store, the little bell above the door chiming softly. Brenda looked up, her eyes widening. "I believe I left something here," Kenjio said, his gaze sweeping the store. Then he saw it, a small, well-loved teddy bear, its fur worn smooth, sitting on the floor by the magazine rack. He remembered Maya clutching it. He walked over and picked it up. "The woman and her daughter who were here earlier," he asked Brenda. "Do you know them?" Brenda nodded. "Imani and Maya. They live a few blocks from here. Imani cleans houses, mostly for the rich folks up on the hill. She's a good person. Works hard." Kenjio looked down at the bear. "Thank you," he said. He paid for another bottle of water, this time with a $100 bill from his clip, telling her to keep the change. Then he got back into the car. "David," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I need you to find out where Imani and Maya live." The next morning, Kenjio sat in his temporary mansion, the Miller file open before him. The numbers were clear, the projection solid. But he couldn't focus. He kept thinking of the little girl with the braids and the teddy bear. He had sent one of his security team to the house David had located. The report was simple, a small rented house in a modest neighborhood. Arthur called again. "Sir, the Millers are here. Are you ready?" Kenjio looked at the file, at the cold numbers representing a family's legacy. He thought of Maya's words, "It's what heroes do," and then he made a decision that went against every instinct he had honed over a lifetime of ruthless business dealings. He stood up, leaving the Miller file on the table. He picked up the teddy bear and got into the waiting car. "Where to, sir?" his driver asked. "Take me to Imani and Maya's house," Kenjio said. "And then, I have a new offer to make to the Millers." When Kenjio walked into the conference room where the Millers waited, the tension was palpable. Old Man Miller, a man with hands as rough as tree bark, sat at the head of the table, his expression grim. His sons, Ben and Sam, looked anxious. Kenjio ignored his waiting assistant, walked to the head of the table, and sat down, placing the teddy bear gently on the polished wood. The Miller stared at it, then at him. "Mr. Soto," their lawyer began, "we have the final papers here." Kenjio held up a hand. He looked at Old Man Miller. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice calm. "I have a new offer for you." Ben, the older son, spoke up. "A new offer?" "We've already agreed to your terms." "Your sons have agreed," Kenjio corrected him gently. "You have not." "I am withdrawing my original offer." A stunned silence filled the room. Arthur stepped forward, his face pale. "Sir, may I have a word?" "That won't be necessary, Arthur," Kenjio said. He turned back to the Millers. "My new offer is this: I will not buy your farm." He then laid out his proposal. He would invest in their farm, provide capital to modernize equipment, improve irrigation, and hire staff. He would help them set up a direct-to-market business, selling their organic produce to high-end restaurants. He would become their partner, not their conqueror. In return, he wanted a small percentage of the profits, but more than that, he wanted them to set aside a portion of their land for a community trust, where local children could learn about farming. When he finished, the old man spoke, his voice raspy. "Why? Why would you do this?" Kenjio looked down at the teddy bear. He thought of a little girl with a worn leather wallet and a belief in heroes. "Because," Kenjio said, "I was reminded of the value of things that cannot be bought or sold." The deal was struck not with a signature but with a firm handshake between Kenjio and Old Man Miller. As Kenjio left, Arthur fell into step beside him. "Sir, I must advise you, this is unorthodox. You're leaving millions on the table." "I'm gaining something far more valuable, Arthur," Kenjio said. He handed the teddy bear to his chief of staff. "See that this is returned to its owner. Her name is Maya." Arthur Thorne felt utterly ridiculous holding a small, plush bear on the porch of a modest house that needed a new coat of paint. He knocked. Imani opened the door, her eyes wary as she took in his immaculate suit and the town car at the curb. "Can I help you?" "Miss Imani," Arthur began, in the smooth tone he used with difficult clients. My name is Arthur. I work for Mr. Kenjio Soto. He was very touched by your daughter's gesture. He believes she may have left this in the convenience store. He held up the bear. Imani's expression softened. Teddy, she murmured. Maya has been heartbroken. She took the toy. Mr. Soto also wanted me to give you this. He produced a thick envelope. He understands that a single mother's life can be challenging. Imani looked at the envelope as if it were a snake. I can't accept that. I assure you, there are no strings attached, Arthur insisted. People like him always have strings, Imani said, her voice low and fierce. Tell your boss we don't need his charity. We take care of our own. Just then, Maya peeked out from behind her mother's legs. She looked at Arthur, her blue eyes wide. Did you tell the thirsty man thank you for buying everyone's stuff? Arthur was taken aback. He hadn't been prepared for the simple, unadorned gratitude of a child. He knows you are grateful, he stammered. Good, Maya said, nodding seriously. Mom says you always have to say thank you. She disappeared back into the house. Imani looked at Arthur, then at the envelope. Please, she said, her voice softer. We can't. But you can thank him for us. For the bear, she closed the door, leaving Arthur alone on the porch with the rejected charity. Kenjio, meanwhile, was discovering a world he had only ever seen from a private jet. He spent the next few days at the Miller farm, trading his bespoke suits for jeans and work boots. He walked the fields with Old Man Miller, learning to mend a fence, drive a tractor, and feel the satisfaction of a day's hard labor. The Miller sons, Ben and Sam, watched him with a mixture of awe and suspicion, but their suspicion slowly melted away, replaced by a grudging friendship. One evening, as Kenjio sat on the farmhouse porch, watching the sunset, a battered station wagon pulled up the dusty driveway. Imani got out, and Maya scrambled out after her, clutching her teddy bear. Imani was holding a large foil-covered dish. Mr. Miller said you were staying for dinner, she said shyly. I thought I'd contribute. Maya ran up the porch steps and stopped in front of Kenjio, her eyes shining. You're the thirsty man, she said, as if it were the most wonderful discovery in the world. Kenjio smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. And you're the hero with the wallet, he replied. They ate dinner on the porch as the stars began to appear. The conversation was easy, flowing from stories of the farm to Maya's adventures in the 3rd grade. Kenjio learned that Imani's great-grandfather, the soldier, had been awarded a medal for bravery. He had come home a hero but had never spoken of it, instead pouring his energy into his family and community, teaching them the simple lessons of courage and kindness. That worn leather wallet was his, a tangible link to a legacy of quiet heroism. As the evening wound down, Kenjio walked Imani to her car. I want to apologize, he said. For my associate, Arthur. I did not mean to offend you with my offer of money. You didn't offend me, she said. You just don't understand. We don't have much, but we have our pride. It's all we have sometimes. I am beginning to understand that, Kenjio said. And I respect it more than you can know. He had come to this town a king, but as he stood on the porch under a canopy of 1,000,000 stars, he realized he had been living in a very small, very empty kingdom. A little girl with a hero's wallet had just shown him the way to a much larger, much richer world. News of Kenjio Soto's strange new project traveled fast. In the boardrooms of his global empire, it was met with disbelief. Whispers circulated that he had lost his mind. The real trouble started when a man named Rexford Finch caught wind of the situation. Finch was a ruthless corporate raider who saw Kenjio not as a rival, but as prey. He saw an opening. Finch began to quietly buy up stock in Kenjio's company, planting stories in the financial press that painted him as an unstable leader squandering resources on a sentimental pet project. The king had abandoned his throne, and it was time for a new ruler. Back in the small town, Kenjio was blissfully unaware. His friendship with Imani and Maya had deepened. One sunny afternoon, he was helping Maya with a school project in the town square. The sun is the biggest because it's a star, Maya explained with grave seriousness. And all the planets have to circle around it. It's called gravity. Kenjio smiled. That's right. The sun is the center. Like my mom, Maya said matter-of-factly. She's my gravity. Kenjio looked at Imoni, who was sitting on a nearby bench, and felt a pull stronger than any business deal. The moment was shattered by the ring of his phone. It was Arthur, his voice tight with urgency. Kenjio, we have a problem. A big 1 inch. He laid out the situation: Finch's hostile takeover bid, the plummeting stock prices, the panic among investors. The empire was on the verge of crumbling. You need to come back, Arthur pleaded. You need to fight this. Remind them who you are. Kenjio looked at the styrofoam solar system, at Maya, at Imoni. He had a choice. He could return to the battlefield of the boardroom or stay here. He thought of what Imoni had said about pride. He knew who he was. He was a builder, and he was no longer interested in building empires of gold. He wanted to build a world of kindness. I'm not coming back, Arthur, he said, his voice firm. You're just going to let him take everything. He can have the company, Kenjio said. The buildings, the jets, the money. It's just stuff. I have something far more valuable here. He ended the call, his heart pounding but his mind clear. He walked over to Imoni. I have to tell you something, he said. I am no longer a billionaire. A slow smile spread across Imoni's face. Good, she said. You were never very good at it. And in that moment, Kenjio Soto, the man who had lost an empire, felt for the first time like the richest man in the world. The news of Kenjio's abdication hit the financial world like a seismic shock. For a brief, dazzling moment, the small town found itself in the international spotlight. But the town closed ranks, offering polite but firm no comments to the reporters who descended upon them. For Kenjio, life became simpler. He moved out of the mansion and into a small rented cottage, using the last of his personal funds to settle his affairs. Imoni and Maya were his anchors. They helped him paint the cottage and plant a vegetable garden. One evening, he confessed his fears to her. I feel adrift. I spent my whole life building things. Now I don't know what to build. Imoni looked at him. Maybe, she said gently, it's not about building things anymore. Maybe it's about tending to them. Her words settled in his heart. He was no longer a king. He was a gardener. But the world he had left behind was not finished with him. A week later, a long black car rolled into town. Rexford Finch stepped out. He hadn't just taken over Kenjio's company, he had absorbed its ambition, and he had come to finish what Kenjio had started. He called a town meeting. At the podium, he spoke of progress and jobs, unveiling a glossy rendering of his vision: the Miller farm paved over, replaced by a massive, soulless distribution hub, exactly as Kenjio had once planned. Mr. Soto had the right idea, Finch said with condescending magnanimity. He just lacked the will to see it through. I, on the other hand, am a businessman. Old man Miller stood up, his voice shaking with fury. That's not progress, Mr. Finch. That's destruction. Finch's smile sharpened. It's my property now, Mr. Miller. I bought the bank that holds your mortgage. A mortgage, I might add, that is significantly in arrears. The farm, the land, it all belongs to me. The room erupted in angry shouts. Finch looked directly at Kenjio, a triumphant smirk on his face. It's your choice. The path of sentiment or the path of profit. Your former friend here chose sentiment. Look where it got him. That night, Kenjio sat on his porch, feeling a crushing weight of responsibility. Imoni found him there. It's my fault, he said. You brought them hope, Imoni corrected him gently. That's not your fault. But I can't fight him, Kenjio said in despair. I have nothing. Imoni took his hand. You're wrong. He has money and power. But you have something he'll never have. You have us. You have this town, and you have the truth on your side. That's not nothing, Kenjio. That's everything. Her words were a spark in the darkness. He thought of the Hendersons, of the people in the town, and of Maya's unwavering belief in heroes. A slow, determined fire began to burn in his chest. "He wants a fight," he said, his voice low and steady. "Then we'll give him one." He was no longer a billionaire. He was just a man standing with his neighbors, ready to defend his home. And in that moment, he was more powerful than he had ever been. The war for the soul of the town had begun. Finch's lawyers filed a motion to evict the Millers. They had 30 days. But Kengio had a plan. He had spent his life navigating the complex world of finance and law. At a meeting in the Millers' barn, he laid out his strategy. "We cannot outspend him," he said, "but we can outsmart him." First, the legal battle. Kengio had spent days in the town library and found a forgotten covenant in the original town charter, a clause protecting agricultural land from industrial development. It was a long shot, but it would buy them time. The second part was a battle for public opinion. They launched a campaign, not with expensive ads, but with their own voices. They told their story through blogs, photographs, and letters. Imani wrote a letter to the state newspaper, not about economics, but about community and a different kind of progress, measured not in dollars, but in human decency. The classic David and Goliath tale began to catch on. Small donations trickled in, enough to hire a scrappy, idealistic young lawyer. News crews returned, this time to cover the rise of a community. Finch, enraged, doubled down, filing more lawsuits and harassing the townspeople. The pressure was immense, but the fear was now mixed with a stubborn, resilient hope. The day of the eviction hearing arrived. Finch's lawyer laid out their case with brutal efficiency. A loan was in default, the property forfeit. When it was their turn, the town's young lawyer, Anna, stood up. She didn't dispute the mortgage. Instead, she spoke of history, presenting the old town charter and the covenant. "This case is not about a loan, Your Honor," she argued. "It's about a legacy." The turning point came when Kengio was called to the stand. Finch's lawyer was merciless, painting him as a failure who gave up an empire for a piece of dirt. Kengio's expression was calm. "I did not give anything up," he said. "I simply traded one currency for another." He told the court about the convenience store, about the humiliation, and about the small girl who had offered him everything she had. "In that moment," he said, his gaze landing on Maya, "I realized that I, a man who could buy anything, was bankrupt in the ways that truly matter. That little girl, with her great-grandfather's wallet and her simple belief in kindness, was wealthier than I could ever hope to be." When the arguments were finished, the judge looked from Finch's legal documents to the fragile, yellowed charter. "This court acknowledges the legal standing of Mr. Finch's claim," he said slowly. "However, the law is not merely a collection of rules, but a reflection of a community's values." He issued a temporary injunction, halting the eviction and referring the case to the State Historical Preservation Committee for a full review. It was a reprieve. It was a lifeline. A collective gasp of relief swept through the courtroom. Finch's face was a thundercloud. He shot Kengio a look of pure venom and stormed out. As he was about to get into his limousine, a small figure blocked his path. It was Maya. She said nothing, but simply held out the worn brown leather wallet. Finch glared down at her. "What do you want, child? Get out of my way." "I think you need this," Maya said, her voice clear and small. "My great-grandpa was a hero. He said you have to be brave to be kind. Especially to people who have forgotten how." Finch stared at the wallet, the source of his humiliation. He looked at the girl's face, devoid of fear or guile. She wasn't mocking him. She was offering him help. For the first time in his life, Richard Finch was utterly speechless. He didn't take the wallet. He simply stood there for a long moment, then, without a word, got into his limousine and was gone. The next morning, Anna received a call. Finch was withdrawing all legal action. He was selling the mortgage back to the Miller family for the symbolic sum of $1. No explanation was offered. He simply surrendered. 6 months later, the Miller farm was transformed, thriving. Kengio had found his purpose, not building an empire, but tending a garden. He and Imani were building a life together, their love a quiet, steady thing. One day, a small package arrived for him. Inside was a single stock certificate in a newly formed company called Legacy Farms, a venture dedicated to supporting small family-owned farms. There was no note, but Kenjio knew it was a quiet acknowledgement from a man who had been defeated not by power, but by a little girl with a hero's wallet. That evening, as the sun set, Kenjio sat on the farmhouse porch with Imani and Maya. Maya showed him a drawing she had made, the farm, with a smiling sun, a man, a woman, and a little girl holding hands. "This is us," she said. "This is our home." Kenjio pulled her into a hug. He looked at Imani over Maya's head, her eyes reflecting the warm colors of the setting sun. He had come to this town a thirsty man, a king without a kingdom. And here, in the heart of this small, forgotten place, he had found everything. He had found his gravity. He had found his wealth. He had found his home.